It's February 2007, and the rescuers have found an empty kayak in the middle of the Tasman Sea. The owner of it is nowhere to be found. His name is Andrew McAuley, who has apparently disappeared from the face of this planet. But to understand how he ended up in this lonely stretch of ocean, we have to take a step back. Andrew's life had always been about testing limits, climbing impossible cliffs, crossing impossible waters. In his 20s and 30s, he became famous as a mountaineer, climbing remote, complex peaks in the Himalayas, Patagonia, and New Zealand. But one accident would change his path forever. In 1998, while climbing in Australia, a rock slipped beneath his hand. Andrew plummeted 30 meters, smashing his knee against the cliff. His kneecap shattered. Though he recovered, the injury meant mountaineering would never be the same. Instead of putting a halt to his adventures, Andrew turned to another. Sea kayaking became his obsession, and almost immediately, he started pushing the sport into uncharted territory. He kayaked across Bass Strait 3 different ways, each more extreme than the last. He crossed the Gulf of Carpentaria, 330 miles of open ocean, sleeping in his kayak at sea. When he planned to achieve this milestone, he showed his wife the chart and told her that the Gulf of Carpentaria was only 5 centimeters long on the map. And while he adventured through the impossibilities of Earth, his wife and son were holding their breaths until he reached home safely. And it would happen every time. It was their happily ever after. The last time he promised to see her, not even his dead body would return, only the silence of the sea, refusing to give them closure. It all happened when Andrew decided to push his limits. After all, he always believed in being limitless. He wanted to paddle across the Tasman Sea in a production sea kayak on what would become a month-long adventure from Tasmania to New Zealand's South Island. On January 11, 2007, Andrew kayaked from Tasmania, estimating that the Tasman crossing would take a month, give or take. Andrew put his faith in the kayak and himself and set out in the sea. His wife and their young son, Finlay, stayed behind, waiting for the updates he sent via satellite messages. Andrew knew there was no such thing as a weather window, that the sea would show no mercy. Still kayaking through the waters, he found sudden storms, 30-foot waves, and brutal winds that shook him to his core. And then, against all odds, Andrew admitted in his video diary a dark truth about the adventure. He admitted how multiple times his boat had betrayed him. One tough current and it surrendered to the waters, tipping either on the side or turning completely upside down, drowning him in the cutthroat waters, ready to eat him up in the weakness of the moment. By now, Andrew clung to one fragile hope. He was nearly 2/3 of the way across, but that's when the ocean unleashed its monsters. Heavy currents brushed past him as he lay sealed inside Casper, a fiberglass cover he took with him to lock over the cockpit of his 19-foot Mirage Sea kayak at night and in bad weather. It looked like an inverted trash can with a huge smiley face painted on it. While 40-knot winds battered him, all that was left for Andrew was Casper, whose wide smile suddenly looked like a grim reaper ready to eat his soul. His weather router received calm but nerve-wracking messages. "No picnic today," it said. Never once did he activate his emergency beacon. Andrew had the nerve to endure it all. And then, after a month at sea, the end finally seemed in sight. Andrew was just 80 miles from New Zealand's South Island when he messaged Vicky. "See you at 9 a.m. Sunday." She was already there waiting at Milford Sound with her son, ready to greet him with friends and cameras. It was about time they celebrated their happily ever after once again. But in this instance, it was different. February 9th marked the day when tragedy hit and swallowed him whole. The New Zealand Coast Guard received a faint, garbled distress call. It was Andrew, his voice weak, almost incoherent. He said his kayak was sinking. Devastatingly, he was just 30 miles away from safety.
Kayak 1, your signal is muffled. Please repeat your message. My kayak's sinking. Somebody just confirm your kayak is sinking.
It was easier to dismiss it as a hoax, but the search team mobilized. Within 24 hours, they found his kayak adrift. However, Casper was gone. Inside the boat were his paddle, satellite phone, emergency beacon, and the photograph of his 3-year-old son. Andrew was gone. They saw Andrew fought until the very end, but the kayak kept betraying him, rolling under the weight of the waves. Without Casper, there was no way to self-right, no shield between him and the deep water. And in the cold, merciless Tasman, even the strongest swimmer is nothing more than prey. 30 miles, that was all that stood between Andrew McAuley and his inevitable glory. Instead, the sea swallowed him in silence, reminding us how small, how fragile we truly are against its endless, hungry waves. It began on April 1st, 2014, in Bouquet, Panama. Morning light spilled over the silent forest that had just swallowed two Dutch students, Kris, 21, and Lisanne, 22, wanted to go hiking. So they laced up their boots and set off to El Pianista, a trail famous for its breathtaking views. On their way into the dense forest, Lisanne and Kris took pictures, looking all radiant and happy from the glow of the filtered sun. They shot the lush green trail, the two of them smiling together, one capturing the other until the camera showed the last normal photograph. Picture number 508 shows Kris crossing a small stream, her face calm, unaware that this would be the final image of them alive. They were never meant to hike alone. The plan was simple. Lisanne and Kris booked a local guide the day after they actually went all by themselves. But for reasons no one has ever explained, they chose to set off solo and early, a decision that would change everything. Nevertheless, the guide was supposed to join them on April 2nd, but the two were nowhere to be found. Rewinding to April 1st, when the two women arrived at a restaurant called El Pianista near the trail. They told the restaurant owners about their plans to hike by themselves. As the conversation went on, the owners decided it was best if the girls took their dog with them to avoid getting lost. And while still at the restaurant, two Dutch men accompanied them during brunch. A few moments later, the four of them set off on the hike along with the owner's dog, and then a Facebook post appeared. It was from the woman who owned the restaurant. The dog had returned home that night, but Kris and Lisanne were gone. Back home, their parents stopped receiving text updates, and just like that, the first missing persons alert went off. On April 6th, their parents arrived in Panama along with the police, dog units, and detectives from the Netherlands, offering a reward of $30,000. Their parents asked for help from the locals while overseeing the investigation themselves. It was a matter of time before hope turned to dust, and hearts sank deep in fear when the truth broke out. While their parents searched for them through the forest, the two women made attempts to escape somewhere deep in the woods. 10 weeks later, a local woman found Kris and Lisa's phones. All they had were pictures and calls. Missed phone calls were made to Panama's emergency numbers. 6 hours into the hike, someone dialed 112, the international emergency number used in Panama. And then they dialed 911, the national emergency number. The first attempt came from Kremer's iPhone 4 at 4:39. Minutes later, at 4:51, Froon's Samsung Galaxy S3 also tried. None of the calls went through. On April 4th, Lisa's phone battery died after 5 a.m., and the phone was never used again. Kris's iPhone would not make any more phone calls either, but was turned onto the search for reception. Between April 5th and 11th, every time it came alive, the wrong pin was entered, or none at all. And on April 11th at precisely 10:51 a.m., the phone was turned on one last time. An hour later, at 11:56 a.m., it went silent forever. Over these days, the phones would attempt 77 emergency calls, each one bouncing off the jungle's deafening silence. The local woman who found their phones also stumbled upon a blue backpack by the banks of the Culebra River. Along with their cell phones, she found their sunglasses, Lisanne's camera, $88 in cash, and bras. But this wasn't a breakthrough in the investigation, rather a disturbing revelation. The stuff was packed neatly, too carefully. What was even stranger was that the bag was crisp dry and spotless, despite weeks of rainforest storms. It felt like someone had carefully left a piece of evidence in a cruel attempt to let their loved ones know that they were still there, the ones whose hopes were hanging by a thread now. Even the locals swore the bag wasn't there a day before, yet this wasn't the end of items reappearing from odd places. Soon after, Kris's denim shorts appeared, folded neatly on a rock. And then there was a boot with a severed foot inside, then a piece of pelvis, then bones scattered along the river bank. They were Kris and Lisanne's. The forensic reports confirmed. Lisanne's bones still had bits of skin clinging to them. Kris's were unnaturally white, as though bleached. They found unexplainably high levels of phosphorus in her bones that only the dark silence of the forest could explain. A Panamanian forensic anthropologist later claimed that under magnification, there are no discernible scratches of any kind on the bones, neither of natural nor cultural origin. There are no marks on the bones at all. Now, the question was, who did it? Why? And how? The pictures they took would somehow provide answers, or rather, spark more questions. But they did confirm the timeline of when it all began to go downhill. The last ordinary picture was named 508. After that, all hell broke loose. Moments after the smiling photo, number 509 was taken, and then it was deleted. Lisanne's Canon PowerShot camera had 133 images. Among them were 90 taken on a single night, April 8th, between 1 and 4 a.m. Blinding flashes into the black void, the jungle canopy lit in fragments, close-ups of rocks, leaves, plastic bags, tissues, arrangements that looked almost ritualistic. And then, the most haunting of all was a shot of the back of Kris's head, slumped forward. Some swore they saw blood at her temple. Theories spread like wildfire. Had they simply gotten lost, one injured, the other fighting to save her until both succumbed to nature? Or was there something more sinister? Maybe foul play, abduction, even ritualistic murder. The missing photo, the clean backpack, the denim folded neatly, the failed phone attempts. Each clue only grew the horror. But perhaps the most alarming detail wasn't what was found, but what wasn't. Despite all the failed calls, all the photos, all the desperate signs of trying to survive, there was no dead body. To this day, no one knows whether it was the wrath of nature or an evil hiding in the jungle. All we know is this: Kris Gremmers and Lisanne Froon walked into Il Pianista under the bright morning sun, and by night, only their remains were found. It was November 10th, 2014, when a YouTuber and hiker, Kenny Veach, disappeared near Nellis Air Force Base, located in Nevada in the middle of the desert. Since then, only his footage from the trip remains as proof of his existence. Kenny Veach wasn't just another hiker by hobby. On online forums, he often bragged about his trips through the Mojave and Great Basin deserts, arid wastelands that seemed to call him back again and again. But in 2014, he discovered the M Cave, a secret that he shared with thousands of his followers. On a YouTube video about an Area 51 technician's drunken confessions, Kenny left a now-deleted comment. He described an experience that seemed almost like a fever dream. While hiking near the Sheep Range, close to the boundary of Area 51, he claimed to have stumbled upon a strange cave, its mouth twisted into the shape of an M. The moment he drew near, his body began to vibrate, the sensation intensifying with every step forward. Terrified, Kenny took a step back and ran away. Not just his followers, but the whole internet went crazy. Some dared him to prove it in his next video. And so, Kenny took it upon himself to show the world his next adventure. On October 8th, 2014, he made a trip near the M Cave. This time, he was left with more questions than answers. Kenny could not find the cave where he had last seen it. He looked confused, almost deluded. Moments later, Kenny claimed to have been under surveillance by a black ram that watched him from the top of a ridge during the entire trip. Failing to find the cave, he made his journey back and recorded the entire experience in a video named The M Cave Hike. However, this would not be the end of the M Cave search. Determined to show the world his truth, he announced a third hike to find the cave. This time, people began warning him to step back, to not take that path again. Fellow hikers, YouTube followers, and even strangers pleaded with him not to go back. Being a sensitive topic of conversation that Area 51 is, some told him that things could spiral out of control before he even knew it. So Kenny came up with a solution, a 9mm handgun to fight off the evil. And thus the journey began on November 10th. Kenny set out once more with his truck packed with supplies, cell phone in his pocket, and a handgun. But there was a small confusion about this particular venture. If he wanted to show the world what he saw, why wasn't a camera with him that day? He told his girlfriend vague details of where he was headed. Later, she would tell people he had been mentally unstable to the point where he might have taken his life. But where was the body? A search operation began, and they tried to comb every inch of Mojave. Volunteers joined forces with Nevada Search and Rescue, rummaging through the Sheep Range in the days after Kenny's girlfriend reported him missing. The desert, however, kept its silence. Then, on November 22nd, there was a breakthrough, though not the one that anyone had hoped for. Near an abandoned mineshaft, searchers discovered Kenny's cell phone. The phone told the followers that he had indeed reached the area, and then simply vanished. Back at the trailhead, his white Honda CR-V still sat waiting. The clues led only to questions, and the Mojave offered no answers. Years passed, and Kenny's story continued to ripple through the corners of the internet. In January 2021, a group of Nevada friends launched a website devoted to him, half memorial, half ongoing attempt to search. By December, that same website took a bizarre turn, changing into an alternate reality game that claimed Kenny Veach had never existed at all. By March 2022, it had disappeared too, erased from the web like Kenny himself.